What happens when a fairy tale wedding turns into a public nightmare? For Sophia Rossi, her life was a movie. She was about to marry Julian Croft, a charismatic millionaire, in a ceremony whispered about as the event of the year. They had the cliffside mansion, the designer dress, the love everyone envied. But at their lavish wedding rehearsal in front of their closest friends and family, Julian stood up to make a toast. It wasn't a toast to their future, but an announcement that shattered everything he was in love with someone else. And she was sitting right there. But Julian underestimated the woman he'd just humiliated. Because while he slept in the arms of his mistress, Sophia planned a counter-move that would leave everyone, especially him, speechless. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about brilliant, cold-blooded revenge. The air at l'Orangerie Beverly Hills' most exclusive dining establishment was thick with the scent of money and white roses. It was the kind of scent Sophia Rossi had grown accustomed to over the past 2 years. A fragrance as intoxicating and dizzying as her fiancé Julian Croft. Every detail of their wedding rehearsal dinner was a testament to his power. The crystal glasses that chimed with the sound of 1,000 tiny bells, the 5-course meal crafted by a celebrity chef, the quiet efficiency of the waitstaff who moved like ghosts. Sophia smoothed the silk of her ivory Tom Ford dress, a nervous flutter in her stomach. Across the long, beautifully adorned table, Julian caught her eye and gave her a smile that could melt glaciers. It was the smile that had first captured her, the one that made him look like a modern-day Gatsby, full of charm, ambition, and a hint of beautiful danger. He was the CEO of Croft Enterprises, a real estate development empire that was reshaping the Los Angeles skyline. At 35, he had the world at his feet, and he had chosen her, Sophia, an art historian, with a quiet background to share it with. "Happy, my love," he mouthed from between his parents, Caroline and Richard Croft. Sophia nodded, forcing a radiant smile. Of course she was happy. This was the dream, wasn't it? Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Julian Croft. They would move permanently into the stunning Malibu mansion he had bought for them, a cliffside architectural marvel they called Serenity House. Julian had made a grand gesture of it, placing the deed entirely in her name months ago as a pre-wedding gift. "A testament to my undying, unconditional love," he had written in the card. "This house, like my heart, is yours and yours alone forever." Her father, a retired history professor, winked at her from a few seats down. He and her mother were still slightly bewildered by the sheer scale of Julian's wealth, but they adored him because he seemed to adore their daughter. To the happy couple. Julian's best man, Michael, raised his glass. The room echoed with toasts. Laughter and conversation flowed like the vintage champagne Julian had ordered by the case. Yet a tiny, persistent splinter of unease had lodged itself in Sophia's heart over the past few weeks. Julian had been distant. More late nights at the office, his phone angled away from her hushed conversations that ended abruptly when she entered a room. He'd blamed it on a stressful merger, and she had tried to believe him. Why wouldn't she? He was building an empire for them. She watched him now, laughing with his friends. He was the sun around which everyone else orbited. But she noticed someone else at the far end of the table, someone who didn't quite fit. A striking blonde in a crimson dress that was just a little too bold for the occasion. Sophia vaguely recognized her as Amber Cole, a junior marketing associate from Julian's company. Why was she here? This was supposed to be for immediate family and the wedding party. Amber caught Sophia's gaze and held it for a fraction of a second too long, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips. It was a look that sent a chill down Sophia's spine. It was the look of a woman who held a secret. The main course was cleared, and dessert was served. The chatter softened as Julian slowly rose from his seat, tapping a spoon against his crystal glass. A hush fell over the room. Everyone leaned in, eager to hear the groom's heartfelt words on the eve of his wedding. "Thank you all for being here." Julian began, his voice smooth and confident. He beamed, his eyes sweeping across the room before landing on Sophia. "Especially you, my beautiful Izzy." Sophia felt her cheeks flush. All her earlier anxieties seemed to melt away under the warmth of his gaze. This was real. This was her life. They say that before you make the biggest decision of your life, you should have a moment of absolute clarity. Julian continued, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly. A moment where you know with every fiber of your being that you're doing the right thing. And I've had that moment of clarity. He paused, letting the dramatic weight of his words settle. Sophia's heart swelled. She thought she knew what was coming next, a declaration of his undying love, a tribute to their future. But then Julian's eyes flickered away from her. They moved down the length of the table and locked onto the woman in the crimson dress. "My clarity," Julian said, his voice ringing with a strange new conviction, "is that honesty above all else is the greatest gift one can give. And so I have to be honest with all of you, and especially with you, Sophia." The room grew so quiet, you could hear the distant Pacific waves crashing against the shore. Sophia's smile faltered. This was not the speech she was expecting. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Julian took a deep breath, a performer in his own grand play. "I cannot go through with this wedding." The words hung in the opulent air, sharp and deadly as shards of broken glass. "I cannot go through with this wedding." For a moment there was only a stunned collective silence. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. It was as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis, sending everything, the crystal, the roses, the smiling faces, sliding into a dark, roaring abyss. She stared at Julian, her mind refusing to process the sentence he had just uttered. It had to be a joke, a horrible, cruel, unfunny joke. But the look on his face was one of serene, almost righteous determination. He wasn't joking. Whispers erupted around the table like wildfire in dry grass. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father's face hardened into a mask of disbelief and fury. Julian's parents, Caroline and Richard, looked utterly horrified, their faces pale with shock. Caroline started to rise to say something, but Julian shot her a look that silenced her instantly. He was in command of this destruction. "This is not a decision I've made lightly," Julian continued, his voice resonating with a nauseating sincerity. He was framing his betrayal as a noble act. "For the past few months, I've been on a journey of self-discovery. I realized that to live a truly authentic life, I must follow my heart, no matter the consequences." He turned his gaze fully from Sophia, making her feel as if she had ceased to exist. His eyes found Amber Cole, who was now looking at him with an expression of pure, triumphant adoration. "My heart," Julian announced, his voice swelling, "is with Amber." He extended a hand, and as if on cue, Amber rose from her seat. The crimson of her dress was like a splash of blood against the pristine white and gold of the room. She walked towards him, her hips swaying with a confidence that spoke of a victory long secured. She didn't spare a single glance for Sophia. Julian took her hand, pulling her to his side. They stood together, a united front, in the wreckage they had just created. Amber has shown me what true, passionate, unbridled love looks like. We are together now, and we will be building our future together. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just breaking off the engagement. He was anointing his mistress in front of everyone at their wedding rehearsal dinner. He was publicly executing Sophia's dignity, her love, her future. Every eye in the room was now on her. They were watching her, waiting for the inevitable breakdown. They expected tears, screams, accusations. Sophia felt 1,000 emotions warring within her gut-wrenching pain, profound shock, and a searing, white-hot rage that threatened to consume her. But in that moment of supreme humiliation, something inside her shifted. A strange, icy calm washed over the inferno of her feelings. Her art historian's mind, trained to observe details and find the hidden meaning beneath the surface, took over. She saw Julian not as the man she loved, but as a hostile work of art to be analyzed, a portrait of narcissism and cruelty. She saw Amber not as a rival, but as a cheap forgery. She met Julian's gaze. He looked at her with a flicker of something pity-guilt. It didn't matter. She would not give him the satisfaction of her tears. She would not let him see her break. Slowly, deliberately, Sophia stood up. Her movements were graceful and controlled. She picked up her glass of champagne, the one that was meant to toast their future. The room fell silent again. She held the glass aloft, not in a toast, but in a final dismissive gesture. "Well, Julian," she said, her voice perfectly, even devoid of any tremor. "I must thank you." But Julian looked confused. This was not the reaction he had prepared for. "Thank you for giving me the one thing you spoke of." Sophia continued, her eyes cold as steel. "Absolute clarity." And with that, she turned not to him, but to his horrified parents. "Caroline, Richard, it has been a pleasure. Mother, father." She looked at her own shell-shocked parents, giving them a look that said, "Stay calm, follow my lead. We're leaving." She placed the untouched champagne glass back on the table with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. She didn't run. She didn't storm out. She walked head held high, her back straight as a queen, leaving a court of fools. She glided past Julian and his mistress, not even gracing them with a sideways glance. It was the most powerful statement she could make. They were beneath her notice. The walk out of l'Orangerie was the longest of her life. She could feel the stares of 50 people burning into her back, but she didn't falter. As the valet brought her car around, her father finally spoke, his voice thick with rage. "Sophia, what are you going to do?" That man, I'll kill him." Sophia slid into the driver's seat of her Mercedes, a gift from Julian she now loathed. She looked at her father, her eyes finally showing the deep, profound hurt she felt. "Killing him is too easy," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "He wants a war. He wants to destroy me. But he has no idea who he's dealing with." As she pulled away from the curb, leaving her stunned family on the sidewalk, she had only one thought in her mind. One destination. She wasn't going to her parents' house to cry. She wasn't going to a friend's for comfort. She was going to see her lawyer. Part 3. The Midnight Council. The sleek black Mercedes cut through the glittering, indifferent streets of Los Angeles. Sophia drove automatically, her knuckles white on the leather steering wheel. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, a smear of colors that mocked the black hole that had opened up in her life. The car, the dress, the life she thought was hers. It all felt like a costume from a play that had just ended in a tragedy. She didn't drive to the Malibu cliffside mansion. The thought of Serenity House was a spike in her heart. Their home. The place where he was likely at this very moment, celebrating his new, authentic life with Amber. The thought was so vile it nearly made her physically ill. Instead, she drove to a discreet, elegant brownstone in Hancock Park. This was the home office of Eleanor Vance, one of the most feared and respected family law attorneys in California. Sophia had met her at a charity function a year ago. Eleanor was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had a reputation for surgically dismantling the egos of powerful men. Sophia had saved her number a just-in-case measure that felt foolishly paranoid at the time. Now it felt like a lifeline. It was past 11 p.m., but she called anyway. "Vance?" The voice on the other end was crisp alert. "Eleanor, it's Sophia Rossi," she said, her voice finally cracking the icy composure from the restaurant beginning to thaw. "I'm so sorry to call this late, but say no more." Eleanor's tone softened with professional empathy. "I heard. My cousin was at the dinner. Where are you?" "I'm outside your office. Your home." "Park in the driveway. I'll buzz you in." Minutes later, Sophia was sitting in a plush leather armchair, a heavy glass of scotch in her hand, the warmth of it a small anchor in the storm. Eleanor's office was a fortress of mahogany and law books, a space that exuded competence and power. Eleanor, dressed in silk pajamas and a cashmere robe, looked less like a lawyer and more like a battle-ready general. "He did it in front of everyone?" Eleanor asked, her expression a mixture of professional interest and human outrage. Sophia nodded, taking a large swallow of the scotch. She recounted the entire sordid affair, the speech, the introduction of Amber, the public coronation of his affair. She left out no humiliating detail. Eleanor listened patiently, her fingers steepled. She didn't offer platitudes or empty comforts. When Sophia was finished, she simply asked the most important question. "What do you want, Sophia?" "I want to disappear. I want to crawl into a hole and never come out." Sophia confessed the pain raw in her voice. "But I can't. I can't let him win. He didn't just break my heart, Eleanor. He tried to obliterate me. He wanted to leave me with nothing but shame. Men like Julian Croft don't just want to win. They want to annihilate," Eleanor said, her voice hardening. "They see people as assets or liabilities. The moment you became a liability, he liquidated you in the most public way possible to consolidate his new asset, the Mistress. It's a classic narcissist's power play." The cold, brutal assessment was exactly what Sophia needed. It stripped the emotion away and laid bare the mechanics of the betrayal. "So what do we have?" Eleanor switched into lawyer mode, grabbing a legal pad. "The wedding is off. The gifts will have to be returned. The vendors will need to be dealt with. The ring, he can have the ring," Sophia said with disgust. "I don't want it." "Good. We'll have it appraised and add its value to the settlement claim," Eleanor noted. "But that's all small change. We need leverage. Real leverage." "What about the house, the Malibu property?" Sophia's heart seized. "Serenity House." The name was a cruel joke now. He bought it for me." "For us?" "How was it purchased? Who is on the title?" Eleanor's eyes sharpened. This was the critical point. "He made such a show of it." Sophia recalled, her voice barely a whisper. "About 6 months ago. He said it was a pre-wedding gift, a sign of his total commitment. He had his lawyers draw up the papers." She looked up at Eleanor, a flicker of memory igniting in her mind. "He was so arrogant about it. He said something like, "This is so you know that no matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me." He insisted the deed be put solely in my name. Eleanor froze her pen, hovering over the paper. Solely, in your name alone. Not as joint tenants. Yes, he said it was more romantic that way. Unconditional. Eleanor slowly leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. Sophia, do you have the paperwork? The deed? It's in a safe deposit box at my bank, along with the card he wrote. The one where he called it an unconditional gift. Yes, it said, "This house, like my heart, is yours and yours alone forever." Eleanor let out a low whistle. "Oh, Julian, you magnificent, arrogant fool." She stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the quiet, dark street. In California, a gift given in contemplation of marriage can often be revoked if the marriage doesn't happen. The classic example is the engagement ring. But real property is different, especially when it's accompanied by a written declaration of intent. She turned back to Sophia, her eyes gleaming. He called it an unconditional gift. He put it in writing. His own lawyers, presumably the best money can buy, drafted a deed of gift transferring 100% of the property to you. He would have to argue in court that despite his own written words, the gift was conditional upon a marriage he himself refused to complete. The judge would laugh him out of the courtroom. The implication of Eleanor's words began to dawn on Sophia, piercing through her grief. The house, the 9-bedroom, 15,000-square-foot mansion on 2 acres of the most valuable coastline in the world. The house currently worth an estimated $45 million. "So you're saying," Sophia began, her voice trembling with a new, unfamiliar emotion, "I'm saying—" Eleanor interrupted, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that Julian Croft didn't just give you a house. He gave you a fortress, and he handed you the keys, the cannons, and all the ammunition. The house isn't a marital asset to be divided, Sophia. It's not his to take back." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression fierce and exhilarating. "It's your property, and tomorrow morning we are going to take possession of it." The sun had barely begun to cast a pale grey light over the Pacific when Sophia's Mercedes, followed by a sleek black SUV, wound its way up the serpentine coastal highway towards Malibu. The storm of the previous night had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean and a cold, resolute calm in Sophia's soul. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman on a mission. Beside her, Eleanor Vance was on her phone, speaking in a low, authoritative tone. "The team is in place. They have their instructions. No aggression unless initiated. Their presence is for peacekeeping and to witness the transfer of property. Yes, the locksmith is 2 minutes out. The local sheriff's department has been notified of a potential civil dispute and will be on standby." Sophia gripped the steering wheel. This felt surreal, like a scene from a movie. But the cold weight of the documents in her briefcase was very real. This morning, before the banks had even opened, Eleanor had worked a miracle calling in a favor with a bank manager to get Sophia access to her safe deposit box. Inside her briefcase now lay the original notarized deed to Serenity House and the sickeningly sweet card from Julian that was now her golden ticket. As they rounded the final bend, the house came into view. It was a masterpiece of glass and white stone cantilevered over the cliff's edge, seeming to float between the sky and the sea. It was meant to be the backdrop to her perfect life. Today, it was a battlefield. She saw Julian's black Ferrari parked in the driveway, alongside a sporty white Porsche. She didn't recognize Amber's, presumably. A fresh wave of nausea and anger rolled through her, but she pushed it down, converting it into fuel. As Sophia pulled to a stop before the imposing electronic gates, the black SUV parked behind her. 3 large men in discreet dark suits emerged. They were not thugs. They were professional security ex-military, by the look of them calm and imposing. Their leader, a man named Marcus with a scar on his chin, nodded at Eleanor. "We're ready, Miss Vance," he said. "Sophia," Eleanor said, turning to her, "you are the legal owner of this property. You have every right to be here. You have the right to ask anyone not invited by you to leave. Let me do the talking. You just stand there and look like you own the place. Because you do." Sophia took a deep breath, opened her car door, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The locksmith was already at the pedestrian gate, his tools ready. Within a minute, there was a quiet click, and the gate swung open. They walked up the long stone driveway, their footsteps echoing in the morning stillness. Marcus and one of his men flanked Sophia and Eleanor, while the third stayed at the gate. The sheer beauty of the place, the Zen gardens, the infinity pool that bled into the horizon, was a bitter pill. Eleanor rang the doorbell. There was a long pause. Then the door opened. Julian stood there, dressed only in a pair of silk pajama bottoms, his hair tousled from sleep. His expression of sleepy annoyance curdled into one of utter shock when he saw Sophia flanked by a lawyer and 2 imposing security guards. "Sophia, what the hell is this?" he stammered, his voice rough. "Good morning, Julian," Eleanor said, stepping forward. "I am Eleanor Vance, Ms. Rossie's legal counsel. We're here to supervise my client as she takes possession of her property." Julian blinked, uncomprehending. "Her property? What are you talking about? This is my house." From behind him, Amber appeared, wrapped in one of Julian's expensive silk robes. Her hair a mess, her face puffy with sleep. She smirked when she saw Sophia. "Look what the cat dragged in. Come to beg for a second chance." Sophia ignored her completely, her eyes fixed on Julian. She let him see the coldness in her gaze, the absolute absence of the love he had taken for granted. "I think you're mistaken, Julian," Eleanor said, calmly opening her briefcase. She produced a certified copy of the deed. "This is a deed of gift executed on November the 10th of last year, transferring full ownership of the property, located at 1 Cliffside Drive, Malibu, to one Sophia Rossi. It is her name and her name alone on the title. As she is the sole owner, she has decided that she no longer wishes for you to reside here." Julian stared at the paper, then back at Eleanor, a dawning horror on his face. He seemed to shrink before their eyes, the powerful CEO persona dissolving into that of a panicked, cornered man. That's insane," he sputtered. "That was a gift. For our marriage, the wedding is off. You can't just—" "Actually, we can," Eleanor cut in smoothly. "Your generous handwritten card that accompanied this deed described it as unconditional. A very specific legal term. You, Julian, are a guest here, and your invitation has just been revoked." Amber's smirk had vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed panic. "Julian, what is she talking about?" Julian ignored her, his eyes wild with rage fixed on Sophia. "You won't get away with this, Izzy. This is a $45 million house. I will bury you in legal fees until you're begging on the street." "Threats are duly noted," Eleanor said, gesturing to the security team. "Now Ms. Rossi is being extremely generous. She is giving you and your Guest, 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and vacate the premises. My men will accompany you to ensure you only take what is rightfully yours. Any attempt to remove art furniture or any other fixture of the house will be considered theft. She then handed him a crisp business card. Any further communication can go through my office. The locksmith is here to change the locks. Your hour starts now. Julian looked as though he had been physically struck. The color drained from his face as he finally understood. He had been so sure of his power, so certain of Sophia's weakness, that he had never considered his grand romantic gesture could be used as a weapon against him. He had built his own prison and handed her the key. "Get out," Sophia said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but carried the absolute authority of ownership. "Get your things, and get out of my house." The look of utter hatred he gave her was terrifying, but it no longer had any power over her. As Marcus and his men stepped inside, motioning for Julian and a now frantic Amber to head upstairs, Sophia walked past them. She went through the vast cathedral-like living room with its floor-to-ceiling glass walls and stepped out onto the magnificent terrace. The sun was higher now, glinting off the endless expanse of the Pacific. She breathed in the salty air, not as a guest or a fiancé, but as the master of it all. The victory was not sweet. It was sharp, cold, and utterly necessary. The war was just beginning, but she had just won the first decisive battle. The news of Julian Croft's public humiliation and subsequent eviction from his own clifftop mansion spread through the gilded circles of Los Angeles like a shockwave. It wasn't just gossip, it was a saga. The story had everything wealth, sex, betrayal, and a stunning reversal of fortune. Page 6 ran a headline, "Croft's Cruel Toast, Bride's Bold Repossession." TMZ had helicopters circling the Malibu coastline, trying to get a shot of the house that had become the most famous piece of real estate in the city. For Julian, the humiliation was absolute. He had gone from being the triumphant alpha male, securing his new life, to a laughingstock overnight. He, a titan of industry, had been outmaneuvered and thrown out of a $45 million property by the quiet art historian he had so casually discarded. His ego, a fragile thing, for all its size, was shattered. He holed up with Amber in a suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel, a temporary measure that felt like a gilded prison. Amber, who had envisioned a seamless transition into a life of unimaginable luxury, was now dealing with a furious, distracted man whose reputation was in flames. The triumphant glow she'd had at the rehearsal dinner was gone, replaced by a nervous, grasping anxiety. This was not the victory she had signed up for. Julian did what men like him always do. When cornered, he threw money and lawyers at the problem. He hired the most ruthless legal team in the state, a firm known for its scorched earth tactics. Within 48 hours, Eleanor's office was served with a lawsuit demanding the immediate return of the property and seeking punitive damages against Sophia for emotional distress conversion and malicious intent. The legal complaint was a work of fiction. It painted Julian as a loving, generous fiancé who had been manipulated by a scheming and avaricious Sophia into signing over the deed. It claimed he was under emotional duress at the time, so blinded by love that he was not of sound mind. It argued the gift was implicitly, if not explicitly, conditional on the marriage that Sophia's erratic behavior had allegedly jeopardized. "It's a declaration of war," Eleanor said, sliding the thick document across the massive marble island in Serenity House's kitchen. Sophia had spent the last 2 days in a surreal state, wandering the cavernous rooms, the sole inhabitant of a palace built on lies. They're going to paint you as a gold digger. They'll leak stories to the press, dredge up every ex-boyfriend, scrutinize every purchase you ever made with his money. They will try to break you. Let them try, Sophia said, her voice hard. They have no idea what's in this house. While Julian's lawyers were drafting complaints, Sophia had been conducting a meticulous inventory. As an art historian, she had always been quietly impressed by the collection of modern art Julian had used to decorate the mansion. He'd boasted about the pieces dropping names like Rothko Pollock and de Kooning. He'd spent millions, he claimed, but now, looking at them not as a loving fiancé, but with her professional critical eye, she saw things she had previously overlooked. A slight inconsistency in the brushwork on the Pollock, a questionable provenance document for the Rothko, a feeling deep in her gut that something was wrong. She spent a full day in the mansion's library, which also served as Julian's home office. She had the code to his safe. It was ironically their planned wedding date. Inside, amongst corporate files and stock certificates, she found what she was looking for: the acquisition records and authentication papers for the art collection. She spent hours cross-referencing the documents with online databases and contacting discreet experts she knew from her museum days. By the 3rd day, the picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. She called Eleanor. "You need to come back to the house, and you need to bring a forensic accountant." When Eleanor arrived, Sophia had several files laid out on the dining room table. "The Pollock is a fake," Sophia stated without preamble. "A very good one, but a forgery nonetheless. I had a colleague at the Getty analyze the high-res photos of the signature. It's off." "Okay," Eleanor said slowly. "So he got duped. It hurts his pride, but how does it help us?" "That's just the start," Sophia said, pushing another file forward. "This is the invoice for the Pollock. He paid $1.2 million for it. But he didn't buy it from a gallery. He bought it from a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands called Artifact Solutions." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Go on." "I did some digging. Artifact Solutions is owned by another holding company, which is owned by another. But the money trail eventually leads back to a man named Sergei Volkov, a Russian oligarch with known ties to organized crime who has been under international sanctions for years." Sophia then pointed to the wire transfer confirmation. "But here's the real problem. Julian's company, Croft Enterprises, expensed the purchase of this fake painting as a legitimate business investment for corporate office decoration. A public company. He used shareholder money to buy a forged painting from a shell corp tied to a sanctioned Russian oligarch." Eleanor stared at the documents, her legal mind spinning, connecting the dots. "It's not just the Pollock," Sophia continued, her voice grim. "It's the Rothko, the de Kooning. He has a dozen pieces in this house. The invoices total over $15 million. I suspect they're all fakes. He wasn't buying art, Eleanor. He was laundering money." The room was silent for a long moment. The lawsuit, the public smearing the fight for the house, it all seemed like child's play now. Julian wasn't just a cheating fiancé with a bruised ego. He was a criminal. His desperation to get the house back suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't about the money or the humiliation. It was about the evidence. The entire mansion was a beautifully decorated crime scene, and he had handed it over to the one person who had the expertise to figure it out. Eleanor finally looked up from the papers, a look of awe on her face. "Sophia, you haven't just won the battle. You've just acquired the nuclear codes." The discovery transformed the nature of the conflict. It was no longer a bitter, high-stakes divorce that never was. It was a game of corporate espionage and criminal exposure. The $45 million mansion was now secondary to the secrets it held within its walls. Sophia felt a strange, terrifying sense of power. The grief for the man she thought she loved had been cauterized by his betrayal, and now what was left was a cold, clear sense of purpose. He hadn't just tried to humiliate her. His entire life, the foundation of the empire he was so proud of, was built on a bedrock of fraud. Under Eleanor's guidance, they moved with surgical precision. They hired a discreet, independent firm to authenticate the entire art collection. The verdict came back within a week. Of the 15 major works in the house, 12 were high-quality forgeries. The total value of the invoices was over $22 million paid by Croft Enterprises to a web of offshore shell corporations. Next, the forensic accountant Eleanor had brought in, a quiet man named David Chen, began a deep dive into the hard drives and financial records Sophia had found in the safe. What he unearthed was even more damning than the art fraud. "It's a classic scheme, just on a grander scale," David explained in a meeting at Eleanor's office. The original documents never left the mansion, which was now under 24/7 security. Julian was using the art as a pretext. He would have Croft Enterprises purchase a wildly expensive piece of art for corporate display. The money would be wired to one of the offshore shells. That shell company would then kick back about 70% of the funds into a private encrypted account controlled by Julian. The remaining 30% went to the forgers and the money launderers like Volkov. He wasn't just cleaning money for others. He was systematically embezzling from his own publicly traded company. The scale of it was staggering. Over 5 years, they estimated, Julian had personally siphoned off more than $50 million from his company, defrauding his shareholders and board of directors. The house wasn't a gift of love, Sophia murmured, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. It was a storage unit, a very beautiful, very expensive storage unit for his crimes. He put it in my name because he thought it would be the safest place in the world, shielded from any corporate or federal inquiry. Who would ever think to look in his loving fiancée's home? The ultimate irony. Eleanor said, a grim smile on her face. His greatest act of hubris became his greatest liability. Meanwhile, Julian's public relations war against Sophia was in full swing. Anonymous sources, clearly Julian's camp, leaked stories to tabloids portraying Sophia as unstable and greedy. An old college boyfriend was paid to give an interview, suggesting she had always been attracted to power and money. A headline on a gossip blog read, "Sophia Rossi Jilted Bride" or "Golden Viper." Sophia ignored it all. The noise didn't matter. They were fighting a battle in the mud, while she was sitting in a stealth bomber, her fingers hovering over the release button. The final piece of leverage came from an unexpected place. As Sophia was methodically clearing out Julian's remaining personal effects from the library, things his movers had forgotten, she found a small personal journal tucked away behind a row of leather-bound classics. It wasn't a business ledger, but a diary of sorts. Her first instinct was to burn it to not sink to his level. But Eleanor had been clear, document everything. She read it. The entries were filled with narcissistic ramblings about his own brilliance, his frustrations with his board of directors, and his contempt for the lesser people around him. But then she found the entries about Amber. He didn't write about love. He wrote about conquest. He described Amber as a thrilling diversion, an easy conquest, and most tellingly a useful pawn. In one entry from just a month before the rehearsal dinner, he wrote, "Amber is getting demanding. She thinks she's won the grand prize. She doesn't realize she's just a tool to extricate myself from the tedious prospect of marriage. Izzy has become too aware, too much of a partner. I need a consort, not a co-CEO. Amber will be far more manageable. He had never loved Amber. He was using her just as he had used Sophia, just as he used his company and his shareholders. He had detonated his life and publicly humiliated Sophia, all as a calculated move to trade in one woman he saw as a potential threat for another he saw as a controllable object. Sophia photocopied the relevant pages. The original went back into the safe with the financial records and art authentication reports. They were ready. Eleanor reached out to Julian's legal team. "We are prepared to discuss a private settlement," she told them, "but not in our offices or yours, a neutral location, and Mr. Croft must be present." Julian's lawyers, arrogant and confident in their public smearing campaign, readily agreed. They assumed Sophia was buckling under the pressure, ready to negotiate a small settlement in exchange for the return of the house. They booked a conference room at a neutral law firm in Century City. They had absolutely no idea they were walking into an execution. The conference room was a sterile environment of polished wood and muted grey tones, designed to project an aura of calm, rational negotiation. Julian Croft strode in, flanked by his two lead attorneys, Howard Lynch and a younger aggressive associate. Julian himself looked tired but defiant, his face set in a mask of arrogant indignation. He and his team were radiating confidence. They believed they were there to accept Sophia's surrender. Amber was not present. Julian had already relegated her to the sidelines, a bauble no longer needed for display. On the other side of the vast table sat Sophia, looking serene and impeccably dressed in a sharp, dark blue suit. Beside her was Eleanor Vance, her briefcase resting on the table, and the forensic accountant David Chen, who sat quietly with a laptop. His presence was the first thing that seemed to throw Julian's team off balance. "Let's make this quick," Howard Lynch began, his voice booming with manufactured authority. "My client has been more than generous. We are prepared to offer Ms. Rossi a one-time payment of $2 million conditional on her vacating the property within 24 hours and signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Given her malicious actions, this is an incredibly charitable offer." Eleanor listened patiently until he was finished. She didn't respond to the offer. Instead, she slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "We can start by discussing this." It was a copy of the deed to Serenity House. Lynch scoffed. "We've seen this. It's the entire basis of our lawsuit. A gift made under false pretenses and in clear contemplation of a marriage my client was forced to call off." "Forced?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That's a creative interpretation of a public humiliation." She then slid a second document across. It was a copy of the handwritten card from Julian. "You'll note the word unconditional, a difficult word to argue against." Lynch's confident expression tightened slightly. "A romantic flourish, not a legal term." "Let's assume for a moment that you're right," Eleanor said calmly. "Let's assume you want to spend the next 3 years and millions of dollars in legal fees arguing the definition of unconditional in open court with the press watching every move. You might even have a small chance of winning. But we're not here to talk about the house anymore." She nodded to David Chen. He turned his laptop around, revealing a complex flowchart of company names and offshore accounts. "We are here to talk about Artifact Solutions," Eleanor said, her voice dropping, becoming sharp and precise. "And Sergei Volkov, and the systematic embezzlement of over $50 million from Croft Enterprises over the past 5 years. The color drained from Julian's face. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. His lawyer Lynch leaned forward, his eyes widening in disbelief as he recognized the names and structures. The younger associate shuffled his papers, suddenly looking terrified. "We have invoices, wire transfers, and sworn expert authentications for 12 forged works of art currently housed in my client's property." Eleanor continued, her voice like ice. "Works of art purchased with shareholder money to facilitate a money laundering and embezzlement scheme. We have hard drives. We have server logs." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "Your lawsuit against my client for the return of the house is no longer just a civil matter. It's an attempt to reclaim and destroy federal evidence. That's obstruction of justice." Lynch was speechless. He looked at Julian, whose mask of defiance had crumbled into raw, naked panic. "This is," Lynch stammered, "this is blackmail." "Don't be ridiculous, Howard," Eleanor countered smoothly. "Blackmail is demanding payment to conceal a crime. We are not demanding anything of the sort. We are simply laying out my client's options. Option A. We reject your insulting offer, and my client, a law-abiding citizen, turns over all of this evidence, every last document, to the SEC, the IRS, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Your client will be ruined, disbarred from serving as an officer of any public company for life, and will almost certainly face a lengthy prison sentence. Croft Enterprises will collapse in the ensuing scandal." She let that image hang in the air before continuing. Or option B. She slid a final document across the table. It was a settlement agreement drafted by her office. "You will immediately and irrevocably drop your lawsuit regarding the Malibu property. You will sign a document relinquishing any and all future claims to the house and its entire contents. You will place $25 million into a trust for Ms. Rossi as compensation for the public humiliation, emotional distress, and the considerable risk she has been exposed to by unknowingly living in a warehouse for your criminal enterprise. And you will both sign a mutual ironclad NDA with the understanding that if you ever breathe a negative word about her again, the evidence package gets sent to the authorities." She leaned forward. "And one last thing." She pulled out the photocopied pages from Julian's journal. "My client is also in possession of your personal journal, which details your contemptible and manipulative plans regarding Ms. Amber Cole. She has no desire to hurt another woman, even one who has wronged her. But if you do not sign this agreement, a copy of those pages will be sent anonymously to every major gossip columnist in this town. Your betrayal of your fiancée was a scandal. Your callous and premeditated use of your mistress will make you a pariah." It was a complete checkmate. Every escape route was cut off. Julian was trapped, exposed, and utterly defeated. The fight was gone from his eyes, replaced by the hollow look of a man staring into the abyss of his own making. He looked at his lawyer, who gave a nearly imperceptible shake of his head, a clear signal that there was no way out. The evidence was too overwhelming, the threat too catastrophic. Julian picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly. Without another word, he signed every page of the settlement agreement. He had walked in, expecting to crush his former fiancée. He walked out, having lost his house, a significant portion of his stolen fortune, and the last vestiges of his power. Sophia watched him leave, feeling not triumph, but a quiet, profound sense of release. It was over. 2 weeks later, she stood on the terrace of the Malibu mansion for the last time. The house was sold. An all-cash buyer, an anonymous tech billionaire, had snapped it up in days. The forged art was gone, handed over to federal authorities as part of a quiet deal Eleanor had brokered. Sophia had the $25 million settlement, the proceeds from the mansion sale, and her freedom. She had won, not by sinking to his level, but by using her intelligence, her composure, and the very tools he had used to control others. He had handed her a gilded cage, and she had used its golden bars to dismantle his entire world. She looked out at this ocean, took a deep breath of the free, salty air, and walked away to start her new life, leaving the ghosts of Julian Croft and Serenity House behind forever. And that's the incredible story of how Sophia Rossi turned the worst night of her life into the ultimate victory. It's a powerful reminder that the game isn't over until the final move is played. Julian Croft thought he held all the cards, but he forgot that true power isn't about money or public declarations. It's about intelligence, resilience, and knowing your own worth. Sophia didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life and her future, proving that sometimes the best way to get over a man is to get everything he owns. What did you think of Sophia's brilliant countermove? Let us know in the comments below. If you love stories of epic revenge and karma, served cold, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a dose of empowerment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss another unbelievable true life story. Thanks for listening.